Welcome to the Double Indemnity podcast. I'm your host, Toby Clegg, with my co-host, Stuart Reid. And today we're delighted to be joined by Ken Norgrove, the CEO of Intact. And every time I say RSA, I'm going to get fined.
Look, I wore the badge so that you wouldn't make the mistake.
Look, it's Intact, so we're going to keep a counter going just in case. But welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
And fresh from Canada as well.
Yes, yeah, we had our Q3 results and earnings call this week. So from Montreal, so just back from Montreal.
Fantastic, excellent. So, it would be wrong for us not to start with the Intact, the rebrand.
Yeah.
So how has that gone? Was it an easy sell to staff? How many times are they mentioning RSA in the office?
No, it's gone exceptionally well. So we've been on this Intact journey for 4 years. You know, Intact acquired RSA in 2021.
Is it 4 years?
Yeah, wow. June 2021, the transaction closed. So it was just at the tail end of COVID, of course.
Yes.
So once the transaction closed, because the transaction was done entirely remotely and via Teams, the Canadians all of a sudden could travel. So once the transaction closed, the Canadians came over to the UK. I wasn't there for the first 9 months. I only rejoined RSA at the time in January of 2022. So I had still been living in Denmark, where I was running the Scandinavian business. So they came over, and that was the first time they had physically entered the premises. So really, really unusual. And there is something which we can talk about later about Intact. In adversity, Intact usually expand.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something about today's market, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, which we'll talk about maybe more opportunity in a difficult market. And we see that as a good thing. So it's been an exciting period.
And you're very much man of the moment, as I was saying to you before this podcast started, in that obviously it's huge news, isn't it, in recent days, the Intact rebrand, etc. How do you feel that's gone? Certainly, if I may, from outside, it's been viewed very positively and done very well.
It's interesting story because Intact never had an intention of rebranding. Like, that was never on the cards. They bought what they saw was a massive traditional British brand and had real strength and depth, particularly with brokers. So they never had an intention of rebranding. And it was only when we decided to exit personal lines, therefore we don't need a consumer brand per se, and we doubled down on commercial lines by acquiring NIG from DLG, that we said, well, actually, we're going to have to move to a single brand. Yeah. And that brand, is it going to be NIG, RSA, or do we move to Intact? And our view was we had transformed so much of our service proposition. We were in the gutter. We were bottom 10% from a service proposition point of view. We weren't growing as a business. So we spent the last couple of years getting ourselves into that top quartile, trying to outperform the market. And this just felt like an obvious thing for us to do, to rebrand Intact. So it was actually our idea we brought to Intact, and they were quite hesitant initially to say, well, we bought this historic brand. And we said, yeah, we still have the history, and the legacy of the history is still important to us, but we're moving to a new model. We're not integrating RSA and NIG. We're actually building a new model as Intact Insurance, and we're putting RSA and NIG into that model. So why wouldn't we call ourselves Intact? We share the same values, we share the same purpose, we share the same ambition, and everyone in our organization could see the uplift in investment, the growth, the ambition. So it was a very easy internal sale. So that's why we announced in April our intention to rebrand, because we wanted to get everyone to coalesce around it internally first before we went to the market. So
it's also quite canny, if I may, because, you know, NIG were desperately proud of their brand, I guess. RSA were desperately proud of their brand, I guess. And you disenfranchise less, I would have thought, by choosing
both parties are adopting it,
So, it's canny too.
Yeah, there's something, though, about, in my mind at least, and everyone probably had their own way of, settling with it. But in my mind, Intact is such a winning brand. You know, they're number one in the Canadian market by a huge margin. You know, they're massive, 20% market share. They outperform on service. They outperform on financial returns. They outperform on staff engagement and on customer centricity. You know, the advocacy is massive, for customer advocacy is massive in Canada. So for us, it's like, that's a winning formula.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to be part of that?
Yeah.
And in RSA, we didn't have that level of ambition over the last 10 years. You know, we weren't investing heavily in the business. And, Intact, since it acquired RSA, has invested over £1 billion in the business.
Right, okay.
Between offloading the pension scheme, offloading preference shareholders, selling the PL business, acquiring NIG, and investing in technology. We're investing at a clip of about £150 million a year in technology to completely re-platform the organisation. Everything about it is a winning mentality. It's all about outperformance. That's all we talk about. We talk about our purpose, we talk about our ambition, and we talk about our values, and then we talk about outperformance. So once you get the first three right, you then focus on outperformance.
I'll shut up in a minute.
No, you go for it.
I think one of the frustrations with RSA, certainly personally, and I know with others, was that they too had invested in getting their systems sorted out, communicating with insurers, communicating with the broking fraternity electronically much better and easier than did. But there never seemed to be an end to it. There was a lot of discussion about it, but it always seemed to be the same story. Presumably, and I'm sure that's the case, you're trying to bring that to a close and actually see the benefits of what has been put in. Is that fair?
Yeah. When I joined, so 4 years ago, we have 11 policy administration systems, 8 claim systems, and a data infrastructure that's just dispersed. And we've replaced all the claim systems. Now we've one single claim system. We were the first ones to actually put Guidewire, to take the Guidewire in the cloud solution. And then we're transforming our underwriting systems. We're actually, RSA never had an underwriting workflow system. So we're implementing an underwriting workflow system. We're using this to catch up from AI point of view. So we've got data ingestion, working with that system, automated rating engines, a data layer, and then a back office system, which we want to do very little, but we've put in a brand new back office system. And interestingly, we've used the taxonomy for the blueprint so that we're aligned with the rest of the market, where the rest of the market, I know Blueprint isn't necessarily the most successful IT implementation in Lloyd's, but actually we've used their taxonomy so that, when it comes to, communicating with outside systems, we've got a common market taxonomy. So it's been super exciting. We will fully get rid of our legacy in 3 years' time, but we're operating on all of our new systems today, and it's just a matter of migrating onto them now and decommissioning the old. And there's 2 impacts. One, working off modern systems, you're more efficient. You can spend more time focusing on the broker and the customer needs rather than, running processes internally. It's more efficient. Like our cost of IT is closer to 10% when it should be closer to 5%. So we'll hit that 5% over the next 3 years as we decommission all the old. And it makes you a safer organisation from a cyber point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Given how difficult
very hot topic.
the cyber environment is with the geopolitical tensions and all the rest, it's really important to have a solid cyber posture, which we have today and we didn't have 4 years ago. So there's a lot of benefits from modernising your technology, and you're more attractive to work for.
And you could be lighter on your feet and be diverse, which I'll come on to later. I'll let you.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've tackled some big jobs in the past. Obviously, you've got a big job now. But the nice part of the job is that you've got the backing, you've got the will and the desire to obviously to really fundamentally push forward in the UK market, and obviously in the commercial space. That's now your area of absolute focus, broker only, and some MGAs, etc. But when you actually look at your career that's led up to this point, there's almost, you've got the kind of the sunny uplands, hopefully now. But obviously you have tackled some big jobs. I mean, let's be honest, the Irish job, going to remediate in Ireland, that must have been an interesting few years, months.
Yeah, no,
was it months or years in the end?
It's funny because at the time I always said to people, I have the most exciting job ever. Yeah. But internally I couldn't say that because it was a disaster. It was a huge scandal. There was fraud, there was mismanagement, and I was asked to come back and fix it. And I was asked to come back having spent 24 years there. So I had 20 years in the Irish business, I had 4 years in the UK business, and then I went off to work for 2 competitors during the intervening 4 years. So to be asked to come back to fix it, it was like all my dreams come true.
Really?
One, it was, I knew the people, I knew how strong the employee base was and the technical skills and capabilities. And I wanted, that was part of my life. I grew up there. I started age 17 in the organisation.
Wow, okay.
So it was 39 years ago. I started on the 1st of October 1986. Yeah. So just over 39 years ago. And so for me, I was passionate about making it right. Yeah. And it was just uber exciting because you were dealing with scandals, fraud, regulator, fixing portfolios, realigning yourself with the broking market, dealing with investigations, both, civil investigations and criminal investigations. So it was all of that in one pot. Yeah. And that was exciting. Yeah, really exciting.
You must have been on if it's fair to say, kind of war footing And it must have been like war rooms and trying to remediate that situation. And now it's an entirely different aspect because obviously you had the Scandinavian experience as well, but you come back and now you've got this, it's almost like blue ocean, this opportunity to really grow it. And you haven't got that legacy that you've got to obviously remediate against. So how does that feel suddenly to find yourself in this growth mode, market orientation?
I mean, that was huge, and it was part of the overall rehabilitation of RSA at the time. And when that was coming to an end, so I did it for 4 years, and everything was back to the way it should be. And I was looking for something new, and so the Scandinavian adventure was brilliant. So 70% of RSA's profits came out of Scandinavia.
Oh, really?
But it was struggling to grow.
Commercial? It was commercial business?
Commercial and personal lines.
Okay.
Yeah, huge commercial and personal lines. So we had 2 big brands, Trygg-Hansa in Sweden and Codan in Denmark. And that was 70% of the group profits. The other 30% came from Canada, and the UK broke even. It never made money.
It's all those brokers, isn't it? Giving you all that great business.
Rubbish.
I blame Stu.
So when Stephen Hester said, we want you to go and grow this business, and it's 70% of our profits, it was the best thing that could have happened. One, different countries, different cultures, going to learn something new. So this, rather than remediation, this was about how do you just give it extra horsepower to grow? Because it's in 2 markets where there's huge loyalty, huge trust of insurers. A lot of the business is direct, so very little of it was broker, which was new for me.
Probably what was so profitable. Yeah, controversial.
Well, very profitable markets, which is another story, because people ask about regulation and customer outcomes. In markets like that, customer outcomes are amazing. So to go and run that, it was a £2 billion business, so it was a huge business.
Brilliant.
It was super exciting.
Cultural issues, or is it quite
and 3 very different countries? The Danes, and I'm probably insult people now by saying this, but the Danes and Norwegians were more similar. Really difficult to get to know, bit standoffish. But once you got to know them, they were amazing. They brought you in, and the Swedes were much more open and easier to get to know. And a much more mixed society as well in Sweden. But we lived in Denmark. I have 2 young kids, one of which was born there. So it was brilliant to live in Denmark because it's such a family-friendly place.
Lovely place.
That was amazing, So we lived just outside Copenhagen, and it was a great lifestyle.
Copenhagen is gorgeous. It's a real favourite of mine. So with this rebrand, with this, wind in your sails, what I have found somewhat surprising in our discussions, just to catch up before you came into the studio, is that Intact really is quite diverse in what it does. Yes, you're commercial. Yes, it's mainly broker. But there are the MGA side of things, both which you may own some of the MGA minorities or whatever in the MGAs, but also giving capacity out. But also, obviously, from a personal point of view, it's quite interesting to see that you're venturing into the purchase of stakes in brokers, which is a strategy that obviously I was involved in with AXA and Bluefin. And it's something that the UK has basically stopped for a while. But the history comes from Canada, I guess, which has been a roaring success, is it not?
So Canada is obviously the engine of our business. It's 2/3 of the business in total. We dominate the market in many ways, but we also own the 2nd largest broker in Canada called BrokerLink. And we also have another business called Broker Financial Services, which invests minority shareholdings in brokers. And we didn't have there wasn't initially a view that we should do the same here in the UK. What happened was, as we repositioned the business and decided personal lines wasn't for us in the UK, we became an entirely broker distributed business. And brokers being our lifeblood. And so when we started to say that, we said, well, what's our broker proposition then? And part of our broker proposition is, well, we can provide financing. We're a big company, we're capital rich. So we can provide financing.
And RSA had a history in that, didn't they?
We had owned brokers in our history, and as we mentioned earlier, Consohar and so on. But we never really had a strategy before behind it. Our strategy now is just to get closer to brokers. So we have it separate to the trading business, so that
That's good.
Yes, so that we're compliant from a regulatory point of view. We've complete Chinese walls between us. It's a different legal entity that owns the minority shareholdings in the broker, and our desire is just to be there to help brokers, whether it's to grow, whether it's to enable them to release equity to shareholders that might want to move on to something else. whether it's to expand and buy smaller businesses, whether it's just to invest in their own organic growth, whatever it is, we just want to be there to help. So the idea behind it is, how can we help and get closer to our brokers? We don't want to run brokerages. We don't want to influence brokerages. We want to stick to what we're good at. We're good at manufacturing, underwriting, pricing, claims, settling claims, and that's where we want to focus on.
So, sorry to interrupt, but if you got, right, it's coming up to Christmas, so if you can play Santa Claus for our broker listeners, is the goodie bag open? What have you got to offer the brokers going forward in the UK market to really, like, the growth that you need to target? Are you really open for business?
Are
you really excited
Yeah.
about the opportunities? And what can they take away from listening to this today to say, oh, I should really be approaching, I was about to say RSA, and I was fine for that. So Intact for brand new facilities.
I think, so we have a big ambition to grow. So we set out to our shareholders, and we don't do it every year. It's about every 2 years. We usually have a big announcement to our shareholders as to intentions we have as Intact Group.
Yeah.
And the last announcement, which was earlier this year, was about the UK business. We want to double in scale. We're a 2.7 billion
Over
business.
what period?
So we want to go from 2.7 to 5 billion by 2030. So we have a huge ambition. To achieve that, we believe we need to do 7 to 10% organic growth, and we'll need an acquisition to top it up and to get to that point. We'd love to consolidate the UK market, without a doubt. But we're focused on what we do day in, day out. Our lever to grow, we believe, is service.
Oh.
Yep.
So we're entirely focused on service. So we've taken ourselves from, bottom of the class in 2022. We're number one in E-Trade. We're number one in claims. We're in top quartile in our traded service. And we want to get our traded service into that outperformance. So we want to be the best commercial lines insurer and a leading specialty player in this market. And we have a couple of segments that we focus on. Obviously, there's the E-Trade segment. Then there's manually traded small and mid-market business, corporate business, and then specialty lines business, where we have a specialty lines business here in the London market, mainly focused on the London market.
Yeah.
And we want to double the scale in all of those segments.
So you're on a hiring spree as well as?
No, we don't need to.
Technology
we don't need to
enabled,
hire. Technology is making us more efficient all the time.
Okay.
And
What sort of workforce do you have? Sorry to interrupt.
So we've about 4,000 people.
Okay, right.
And what we want to do is we want to use the existing workforce, but become way more efficient as an organisation. So this year, for example, we've doubled the number of quotes we put into the market compared to last year.
Okay, wow.
So we've gone from 19% of submissions we received, we would have quoted on last year, we're up to 40%. Our ambition ultimately is to bring that to 65%, which is where our Canadian colleagues sit today.
Yeah.
And we're using the platform and the underwriting appetite that we have.
So have you widened the underwriting appetite to enable that? Or
It's a really strange thing, because it's the one thing an insurer hates a broker to ask this. What's your underwriting appetite? Because
what are you looking for this week?
Our underwriting appetite is pretty much unlimited. There's a dozen trades that we won't do, and there's certain segments we're not in. We're not in aviation. We don't do political violence and terrorism and so on. But other than that, our appetite's pretty expansive.
Yeah.
And it's, can you get the right price and the right terms and conditions on it? And that kind of defines where your appetite ultimately lands.
Of course.
Our problem as an insurer, and I think it's a common problem in the market, is we have different appetites depending on the individual underwriters, the locations you go to. We don't have a consistent application of our appetite.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is, one, we're trying to educate our people across the business how to expand and use that appetite, because I think we've become a bit risk averse since the troubles RSA had back in 2014. So we're trying to reteach people things they know but haven't applied previously. The other bit we're trying to do is trying to figure out, how do we use technology and these underwriting workflows and the data ingestion tools we're putting in? How do we use the technology to force it onto an underwriter's desk for them to do the final underwriting and negotiation with a broker? Because if we can use technology, then you get the consistent application across all of your locations, functions, and people. And, you do a couple of things. You make them way more productive, but you also make their job much better.
And the data's better as well, isn't it?
You take away the miserable administrative tasks, and you put them into have a conversation, pick up the phone, engage the broker, underwrite the final parts of the risk, and generate new business. And it's exciting to generate new business, right? For every underwriter.
I think if there was a criticism of RSA in recent years, is that you'd hear that they'd insure whatever it was, and you'd be going, I didn't know you did that. And that was a common thing. What are your thoughts on the UK market in that, over the last 5, 10, 15 years, 10 years probably, we've now got the very, very big brokers, and we've probably got quite a lot of small brokers, but very little in between. Does that present certain challenges to you with the buying power you've got up here and the smaller brokers down there?
Yes and no. It's a really fragmented picture, though. When you paint it that way, it sounds quite simple. But if you look at the larger brokers, some of them are really well consolidated and act in unison. And that's relatively straightforward to deal with. You can engage, you get the same seamless picture all the way through. Most of the large brokers, though, still act very regionally and locally. And that's part of their success because they're closer to the customers, they trade and engage in a certain way. So for us, in one sense, we need to match that regional presence and regional personality of the brokers. So you pick any of the big brokers, they'll have a different personality in Glasgow to Manchester to Leeds.
Absolutely, they will.
Yeah.
And our view is we still need to match that. So whilst, yes, we centrally need to deal with brokers and they've got more buying power, which insurers generally don't like, because they can put more pressure on you. But actually, at the end of the day, the trading happens at a local site level.
Is that going to filter out to the branch network that you have?
So we've pretty well coverage. I think the gaps we feel we have is probably a little bit in the southwest and a little bit in the northeast. We don't have a strong footprint in terms of trading sites, but we cover those trading sites from, all of our big sites that we have. Bristol's probably closest to the southwest, and up, we've Halifax, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Birmingham, up in the Midlands. So, we're keeping an eye on whether we need to put a physical presence there in those two locations to complement what we have. But that's probably it. We're pretty much well covered throughout the country.
I think that's a very powerful message. I think a lot of brokers will be applauding it. Having run a broker with many offices across the country, that local knowledge, person to person or insurer to broker to client is so important. Yeah.
And it's trying to figure out how you use the power of those consolidated brokers to reach the 100 offices they have. So one broker we're talking to at the moment, and we're talking to two of their regional hubs, and between the two regional hubs, they have 100 offices. And as an insurer, getting to those 100 offices is really difficult, but leveraging the two regional hubs they have just makes that much more powerful, and we can leverage
global deals as well. Can I also ask, I think I might be right in saying you're quite rare in this respect, that a lot of accountants rise to the top of insurers. And you're an actual FCI, you're a genuine, dyed-in-the-wall chartered insurer, which is wonderful to see. Does that help with the Intact growth story now going forward, that you're so aligned to the actual insurance as opposed to just merely the financial? And I mean that in the sense that you're an underwriter by trade. You've got it in your blood, in your experience. And actually, is that going to feed through as a leadership part to, does that make sense as a question? Will it actually be part of the DNA of going forward?
I'd like to think so. If I look at Intact, so Intact was only formed in 2009 out of the financial crisis. It was originally the personal lines business of ING Bank. And the CEO of that business, who's our CEO today, Charles Brindamore, went along to ING Bank when they were divesting of non-core banking assets and said, well, we'll float this business. And they did, and they raised 4 billion and, the 5.5 billion market cap when it floated in 2009 on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and it's 55 billion today.
We missed that one, didn't we?
Wish I could have a time machine.
I know.
And just look at the share price. It's just done awesome things over that period of 15 years. But everyone who's a senior executive at Intact is an operator, has worked in the business. So they've either been actuaries, underwriters, traders, and broker owners. Louis Gagnon, who runs our Canadian business, came from a broker we acquired many years ago. And the foundation of the business is we're all operators. You get involved in the business. You're not running a business remotely. You get your hands dirty, you get deep into the business. And even today, when Charles comes over to the UK and he spends a lot of time in the UK, he'll go to one of our sites, he'll spend time with a half a dozen brokers. He's out in the market trading. That because he believes everybody in the organization needs to do it. It's not just our salespeople or our traders or our local regional managers. It's actually for all of us to be involved in that. So it's part of the DNA. So for me, I love that. So I started as a commercial underwriter. I actually started as an administrative assistant in the commercial underwriting department in Royal back in '86. So for me, I love that because I've always been connected to the business.
Sure,
I've been in sales, I've been in underwriting, I've been in pricing, I've done claims. So I understand the business. And in Intact, you don't progress unless you move across the organization and understand all the components of the business.
That's great.
So it's a great message for our people to say, you might start out in finance or claims or underwriting, but we want you to move laterally and upwardly across the organization, because the people who we want managing the business are people who understand all the components of the business.
Jay, we have to go to the question, but it's exactly what Jen Kilty was saying, wasn't it?
Yeah,
She herself had done that and earned her spurs, as it were, and therefore had that granular knowledge going all through the business. We've flown through the time, but we have got to.
No, absolutely. So we always end on an opportunity for one of our guests to give us a kind of, not necessarily controversial, but a thoughtful moment. It can be controversial if you like, about where you see the market going, or any sentiment that you've got you'd like to share, so that people can go away and think, oh, that's a really interesting point.
I don't know if I have one that fits that bill, but the thing for me is, like, our market always has been, and in my mind always will be, about relationships.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. Like, and that's why you need to be an operator in the market, going back to the last point. So for me, if you don't have relationships, you don't have anything, because we, trade together, we trade with customers, we trade with brokers, and making sure that you keep those relationships consistent, professional, and you really partner together. For me, so it's always about relationships.
I like that.
And I'll leave you with one last thing, because I always say this when people talk about my career. I'm from a working class background. My dad was a sheet metal worker, but he said to me on my first day going into the office, be nice to everybody, whether it's the cleaner, the receptionist, the CEO, just be nice and respectful.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean be a patsy, but just be respectful to everybody you meet. And I think that's what's helped me in my career, is you build up those longevity of relationships by being respectful of people. And we talk about our values now, and they resonate really strongly with me, particularly, integrity and respect are two of our five values. And they just resonate so much with me. So for me, it's just all about relationships.
I love it. That's a wonderful thing to end on, isn't it? Yeah. So a big thank you for listening and joining us today, and tune in for more.